I want to focus for a few minutes anyway on Presidents Trump, Zelensky and Putin. A conversation is due to take place in about 10 minutes' time between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump, coming after Zelensky accused Putin of breaking his pledge to Donald Trump in the phone conversation they had, saying that there would be no more attacks, for now anyway, on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, something Volodymyr Zelensky says has already been broken. So Bill Browder joins me, anti-corruption campaigner, head of the Magnitsky Global Justice Campaign and chief executive of the finance company Hermitage Capital. Good afternoon to you, Sir Bill. Good to have you on the programme.
Great to be here.
Your take on these meetings, the one that's taken place and the one that's due to take place, do you see it as performative on Putin's part or anything substantial potentially in it?
Well, basically, a week ago in Saudi Arabia, President Zelensky agreed to an unconditional ceasefire for 30 days in order to enter into a sort of longer-term peace negotiation, very much being pressured by the United States to make that offer. And then the obvious thing, you can't have a ceasefire with only one side cease firing. And so then the Americans needed to go to Putin and ask for him to make a 30-day unconditional promise of ceasefire so that they could then stop firing on each other and have a more substantive negotiation. And last night, Putin rejected that request. He used a little bit of the language. He said, we will do a ceasefire, a 30-day ceasefire where we don't fire on energy infrastructure, which 57 minutes after the call, he fired on a power plant in Slavyansk, Ukraine. And so basically, and Putin has rejected Trump's request. And all this talk about they had a really good conversation and it lasted for an hour and a half and they've agreed to meet again and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean anything. There's a war going on. Putin has the unique ability to stop the war by stopping the firing on Ukrainian positions, and he's chosen not to. And so I'm not sure what will be discussed with the Ukrainians. They were already browbeaten into agreeing to a ceasefire already. What else can they agree to now based on the conversation with Putin yesterday?
And you've spoken on this network many times, often with James O'Brien. And actually, I remember it's probably a decade ago now, I was in this studio at the tail end of a conversation you were having with James O'Brien. It was the first time I'd seen you in person and listened to you in person. And you said then, a decade ago, the West, the world is getting it wrong with Putin. They are failing to see the danger that he is. And, you continued in that vein. Fast forward to today, the world sees it maybe quite differently now and has caught up with your view of the man. Is he just at this point when it comes to these talks, is he basically playing with people here?
Absolutely. So Putin he's been very consistent and actually pretty transparent. He has a maximalist approach towards Ukraine. He wants Ukraine to surrender. He's never had a different approach. He's never had different demands. He started the war saying that Ukraine should surrender, and he's as of today saying Ukraine should surrender. And I can also tell you one thing about Putin, having been in conflict with him directly for the last 15 years, is I've never seen a single moment when Putin ever compromises. He doesn't negotiate, he doesn't back down, he doesn't compromise. He only escalates. And so there's no reason to expect that he would be doing something differently right now. It's just as plain as day, as far as I'm concerned, that Putin intends to carry on this war. He has no reason to compromise, and he doesn't compromise in any other situation. Why would he do so here?
So what Donald Trump must know that that's a risk or indeed a fact. I mean, who knows what he knows, but what will he do if he suddenly realizes that he's starting to look like a bit of a chump on the world stage being played by Putin? He won't take kindly to that, will he?
They're just spinning and spinning and spinning it out of the White House, saying this was a good meeting. He wasn't a chump. He's a good guy. Putin is a good guy. They're doing good things. But that's it's just plainly untrue. You can't.
But how far can that fantasy go from the White House perspective, do you think?
Well, I mean, they've been able to gaslight people in all sorts of ways in America over all sorts of issues. So perhaps they can somehow convince the American public of that. But over here we don't see that. All we see is what we see, and it's what we see doesn't look very good. And Putin has humiliated Trump, and that's not good for Trump. But that's that Putin made Trump wait for an hour. Putin was doing a speech to a bunch of businessmen in Moscow instead of talking to the most powerful man in the free world. I mean, if that wasn't a sign of disrespect, I don't know what is.
Deliberate.
Very deliberate, of course.
Is he just playing a waiting game, Putin, now? Just let them dance. I'll join in every now and again and pretend I know the steps, but then I'll just go back to what I was doing and bomb a bit more of Ukraine.
Absolutely. It's a KGB rope-a-dope, as I call it, where he's just putting out a little prospect of more negotiations. Let's set up an expert commission. Let's discuss, the issues connected to these issues and so on and so forth. And Trump can then announce that we're having more bilateral meetings with Russia and nothing will happen. But, Putin can drag it out, string it out, dangle a little thing here and there, and then do nothing. And even if he were to make a promise, Putin always breaks his promises. Putin always lies. And so there's no reason to expect anything good to come out of these conversations with Putin. And Putin has made it very clear that he has no intention of doing anything other than carrying on.
And we've seen, just a final question about Volodymyr Zelensky, before he in 4 minutes' time is about to speak to Donald Trump, unless he's kept waiting as well. Where does this leave Zelensky and Ukraine? Because they've clearly been diplomatically, politically roughed up by the United States, haven't they, over the last 10 days or so? What now for them? I mean, clearly continuing to defend Ukraine, obviously, but then what?
Well, they're hoping that Europe steps up and helps where the Americans will probably let them down. And they're hoping that the $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves that have been frozen will be confiscated and used for the defense of Ukraine. And they will carry on and they will fight on, because the surrender is much worse than anything that they're experiencing right now.
What do you think surrender would look like for Ukraine?
You remember those images in Bucha and Irpin where the women were all gang raped and then the men were all killed, shot,
in the forest,
and put into shallow graves, and the children were kidnapped? That's what surrender means.
You envisage that kind of horror across Ukraine if they surrender? I
do. That's what will happen.
Across the whole of Ukraine.
And the Ukrainians know that's what's going to happen, which is why they're ready to expend, unbelievable, sacrifice to stop the Russians, because they understand what it means. And it means absolute horror, hell, the worst kind of hell you could ever imagine.
Well, thank you for speaking to me today, Bill Browder, anti-corruption campaigner, head of the Magnitsky Global Justice Campaign and chief exec of the finance company Hermitage Capital. Once we have some detail on that phone call that's taking place, we are told around 2:00, so the next few minutes, between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump, we'll bring that to you here at LBC.